Hello, and welcome to People of the Pod, brought to you by American Jewish Committee. Each week, we take you beyond the headlines to help you understand what they all mean for America, Israel, and the Jewish people. I'm your host, Manya Brashear-Pashman. As the sun began to set in Australia on Sunday, more than 1,000 gathered on Bondi Beach in Sydney to celebrate the first night of Hanukkah by the sea. But at about 6 p.m., terrorists fired into the crowd, killing at least 15 and wounding dozens more. Students with the Australasian Union of Jewish Students had just wrapped up a shabbaton before they headed to Bondi Beach, and our own AJC Director of Campus Affairs, Moshe Lencer, whom we affectionately call Moosh, was there with him shortly before the attack, and he's with us now. Moosh, welcome to People of the Pod.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I wish it were under very different circumstances. How are you doing, and how are the students doing that you are spending time with there?
It's a wonderful question, and the more I think about it, the less I have a clear answer. It's a combination of helplessness and at the same time desire towards hope and trying to figure how to move through this very dark time. The last 24 hours, a little bit more than that, have been very interesting, as this has been my first time ever in Australia. I landed here Friday morning. Right now, for context, it's Monday night. And until about 6 p.m. on Sunday, it was a very pleasant, positive experience filled with moments of Jewish pride and joy. The reason I'm in Australia even in this moment in time is AJC has a partnership with the Australasian Union of Jewish Students, known as AUJS, which is the student organization that focuses on leadership for Jewish students in Australia and New Zealand. And I was invited to take part in a shabbaton that was held just outside of Sydney with student leaders from both Australia and New Zealand. The weekend was filled with laughter and joy and happiness, and we were making edible Chanukias before the holiday. We were talking about ways to advocate for what student needs and for what they need. We even finished the day with kayaking, and there was a lot of happiness and a lot of desire because, as I learned recently, and I should have understood before, by being in the Southern Hemisphere, this is the beginning of summer. This is the first few weeks when people finish the school year and they're enjoying and they're celebrating. And that's why the dates were chosen. So it's like beautiful and it's sunny and we were exploring everything. And as we were about to start celebrating a holiday that's all about our community and resilience, our resilience was tested again. And now, as just over a day into it, we're still trying to see what we can do and how to move forward and to support the community right now as it's hurting.
You were actually at Bondi Beach shortly before the attack. Can you kind of describe the environment and why you were there in the first place?
Yeah, of course. As mentioned, we were doing this shabbaton and programming ended around 3 p.m. And it's summer. It's the first few days of summer. If you Google what can you do or what should you do and see in Sydney, the first few things people will see will be the Opera House, which is, I think, the most iconic place in the city. And then the second thing is it says go to Bondi Beach. It's such a big piece of the community here and where people go. It's also super close to where most of the Jewish community lives. So we were saying, okay, the Shabbaton's done. A lot of the people are now local. What can we do in between before people hop on trains and flights and everything? Let's go to Bondi Beach. We all met up at the frozen yogurt location that's very iconic there. The chain itself is very connected to Sydney. And all the participants just went there as an unofficial thing. I got there a little bit after, just exploring. I said, my first time in Australia. Like, okay, what do? I go to Bondi Beach. I walked around there. I was seeing this. It's the first week of summer. School just ended. The beach was packed. It was sunny, beautiful. I don't think there was a person in Sydney that wasn't at the beach yesterday. And I left the beach at around 5:10-ish, heading towards a dinner with the student leaders at the Opera House, because if I'm already there, I should see everything else.
And so why, having walked that beach, why was there a Hanukkah celebration there? Can you tell our listeners who may not be familiar with who organized it, and why was the first night celebration scheduled for that Hanukkah by the Sea?
Hanukkah by the Sea was one of several events that were held yesterday by the Jewish community here. It had over 2,000 people, and it wasn't the only one. There were many events that were designed to celebrate, to have joy. Hanukkah is a holiday of lights. The geography here is that for a lot of us, Hanukkah is a holiday that happens in the cold, in the winter, and the dead of it. This is the beginning of summer. It's summer. We go to the beach. I was joking with them that their Christian friends do Christmas in July just so they can have snow or cold associated with the holiday. And just to think about it, right? So going to the beach, going to where it's beautiful, that's part of the culture here. There were other events not even far from it. It was the best way to celebrate it. And Chabad of Bondi is a community that's growing, and it's a community that's beautiful, and it's using different aspects of the tapestry that is the Jewish community of Sydney. So it's more of like, why not do it here? Why not have it there? It's the most connected to what's going on. It would have been surprising if they weren't doing something here.
Was there a giant menorah on the sands of the shore, or how did they have it set up?
I will be honest that I missed the preparation, but from what I've seen, it's Chabad. They bring giant menorahs wherever they go. This is the core of what Chabad is to bring the light, to bring the essence of Judaism wherever it might go. I walked also today by another location that wasn't far, which had another Hanukkah event yesterday with rides and everything, and they still had the Chanukiah there that also was a huge Chanukiah. There wasn't hiding of what is going on. The people saw the flyer for what was going on. It was very public. There wasn't a feeling that this holiday should be celebrated in closed doors and hidden from the public.
So you had mentioned earlier offline that you went back to Bondi Beach with the students that you were there to observe the Shabbaton with. Can you tell me what the scene is the day after?
Yeah, I arrived there today with the senior leadership of AUJS, who, for context, these are college-age students that have tremendous amount of responsibility and leadership and ability. They oversee Jewish students across the whole continent and New Zealand, just to explain. And these are people that are in their early 20s. And today, it was very important for them to make sure that we stop by and pay our respects. We got flowers. We want to go and stop at the site. And we weren't the only people with this idea. And from everything I'm understanding, was a combination of very structured and a very spontaneous situation. People showed up with flowers and stones to mark they were there, and candles and stuffed animals, and ways to make sure that the location is not going to be seen as something that isn't important and isn't marked at what the horrible scenes was there. We got there, and I would say there were, let's say, about 120 sets of flowers. And then we stood there for another hour and a half. And I think it quadrupled, if not more, in that hour and a half. And it was just lines and lines of people. And what was very also noticeable, these were not just Jewish people, just Jewish individuals. I saw people of faith from different religions. I saw people walking with groceries and putting down flowers and heading back. I saw children. I don't think there's someone in this whole area, and could have been even outside of Sydney, that didn't want to stop and pay their respects because of how horrible the situation last night was and how much it hurt the community, the Jewish community, of course, as being a part of the victims, not just the Jewish community that goes to Bondi, but also the community of Sydney. Many dignitaries have visited the sites in the last 24 hours. There were several moments of spontaneous singing. It was Hebrew singing, and it was started by different groups in different moments. It was just ways to those standing there to kind of find some solace in it. It was an attempt, and I'm saying an attempt because I don't think anything can really help, but an attempt to try to start processing. And I cannot speak to the community itself because I'm an outsider. I am fortunate enough to be connected to the members here and to those that are really trying to do what they can to continue and to move forward. But it, as an outsider, seeing something like this is actually, there's some beauty and community in very, very dark times. And to know that it's not just the Jewish community helping each other, but it's the whole community here that are showing up. It just shows there might be some hope.
Was this out of the blue? I mean, in your conversations with people there on the ground, was this shocking?
Antisemitism in Australia has been on the rise for a while now. Since October 7th, a lot of events have happened. If it's been synagogues that were set on fire, and if it was individuals that would threaten children right outside of their kindergarten, if it was swastikas being spray painted. As I mentioned, the shabbaton started Friday. I landed at 9 a.m. on Friday, and I needed to be at our meeting place that was a main synagogue in Sydney at 11 a.m., meaning that by the time I went through customs, got all my stuff, I just Ubered directly there with my luggage. When I got to the synagogue, I was greeted by a security guard who looked at me, and he was very confused of why a person he doesn't know stands outside of his synagogue with luggage. Well, the first thing he told me is like, you're not allowed to walk in with luggage into a synagogue in Australia. And I understood exactly why he was saying this. They don't know me. They don't know what's in my luggage. All of this story to say is that there is this tension. And I said it to him, and I said it when I walked in, that I really was appreciative that with everything, the security guard, no matter what I was saying, that was like, you're going to open your luggage. I'm going to go through everything you have to make sure that you're not, no matter what you're going to tell me, I'm making sure that there's nothing here that can harm this community. With that being said, Australia as a whole has been lucky to never have events like this, not just on the anti-Semitic side. They've never had this large of a terrorist attack on its soil. So it's one of those, they're preparing for what they know, not what they thought would ever be. Gun laws, unlike the U.S., are a lot more stricter. It's very uncommon to even have weapons so easily. I'm not going to say that people saw it specifically coming. They felt like there's a slow simmer of events. Something's going to happen. It's not a culture like the Jewish community in the U.S. that checks its media and the updates every 5 minutes, that 3-4 hours after event yesterday in downtown Sydney, people were not even aware what was going on in other places because they didn't have to check the news. The Jewish community, of course, did. We were told to shelter in place as everything happened. But if you were someone that is not connected to the Jewish community in Sydney, and you were in downtown Sydney, which is in a different part by the Opera House, there's a huge chance you had no idea what was going on because you didn't need to, because you didn't think that you need to think that something's going to happen. And then moving forward to today, the whole feeling shifted. I got into an Uber that took me to the area, and his first reaction was, I really hope nobody's going to try to shoot you. Without even knowing I'm Jewish or not, he just like, all he knows, it was that there was a horrible attack last night in that geographical area.
So it's kind of shocking that you landed at 9 a.m. and by 11 a.m. you were already introduced to the precautions that they took and the severity with which they took them. And then not even 48 hours later, the worst. What can we do here in the United States or anywhere in the world where people might be listening to this podcast? What can we do to bring comfort, to bring solace, to show support that really will make a difference?
I'll say that out of what I've been noticing, and then AUJS has actually just launched about 45 minutes ago a new initiative that they're asking the community, and when I say community, I mean the Jewish community at large around the world, to share how they're spreading light right now and this holiday. Send videos and pictures of lighting the menorah. They want to feel that the community and the Jewish pride and joy is still going through this. The community, as it's hurting and it's trying to recover from this, is also trying to show that there is still a vibrant Jewish community, because at the core of this event is to have us hide and is to have us stop being who we are. And if we stop celebrating Jewish identity, it means they won. They mean they got exactly what they wanted. by actively attacking us and killing us, they're also stopping us from continuing to be the community that we want to be. So that's one thing. The other thing that I am seeing, and again, I don't want to speak for the community itself, I'm just saying from my experiences with it, is to make sure that if you have any interaction with decision makers, if it's in Australia or diplomats that represent Australia around the world, or even in your own country that can make any type of public comments, as I said, it was simmering for a while. This didn't show up out of nothing. And in the 24 hours since, we saw a person in California shooting towards a house that had Jewish symbols outside of it. We saw the candlelighting in Amsterdam being interrupted by people that were sympathizing with those that shot our community in Sydney. And we saw people changing their behaviors. But I think right now what we need to do is putting some pressure to make sure that they're taking it a lot more seriously here in Australia, that they're taking it a lot more seriously around the world, that after 2 years when we were saying this is not just about what they're using the word of Israel as the fault, we're not against the Jews, it is against the Jews. The lighting of a Chanukiah in Sydney, while there's a ceasefire, has nothing to do with Israel, has all to do with Jewish identity and community. And that's what we need right now to make sure that, we're speaking out, we're making sure that elected officials, those that can make difference, are making a difference.
You talked about the past 2 years, that there has been a rise of anti-Semitism since October 7th. And just a few days after October 7th, you also mentioned the Opera House. The Sydney Opera House was illuminated in blue and white, the colors of the Israeli flag, to show solidarity after the terror attack. And yet there were protesters outside yelling anti-Semitic slurs. And I'm curious if there has been any indication or expression of similar sentiments in the days after this terror attack.
From my conversation so far with the community, and from everything I saw at least today at Bondi, it seems like the larger community is right now hurting for its own geographical Sydney community, for the Jewish community within its community. I do know this morning, as people were putting down flowers, there were some videos of people wearing keffiyehs that were actively trying to explain the connection between the shooting and their beliefs, and were trying to intimidate and interrupt as people were trying to mourn and the site. But it was very anecdotal. I believe it was 1 or 2 people at most, and that does not represent a much larger thing. Just in comparison, as you mentioned, that on October 9th, that the bridge area in Sydney saw a protest that had hundreds of people, so it's a very different thing. With that being said, we're only 24 hours into this. Our community knows that sometimes we get a short grace period and then it flips. So I am hoping that by the time this airs, what I am saying won't change.
You and me both. Well, you reminded me of the 16-hour time difference. It reminded me that on New Year's Eve, I always tune in to watch the fireworks in Australia, because they're always the first to ring in the new year. And it, to me, is kind of a early first sign of hope for great things to come in the new year. And then, I don't want to wait, in other words. I always tune into Australia for that sign of hope and of newness. So I hope that I hope that a page turns in Australia for the better, not for the worst. So, Moshe, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you by AJC. Our producer is Atara Lakritz. Our sound engineer is TK Broderick. You can subscribe to People of the Pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, or learn more at ajc.org/peopleofthepod. The views and opinions of our guests don't necessarily reflect the positions of AJC. We'd love to hear your views and opinions or your questions. You can reach us at peopleofthepod@ajc.org. If you've enjoyed this episode, please be sure to tell your friends, tag us on social media with hashtag #PeopleOfThePod, and hop on to Apple Podcasts to rate us and write a review to help more listeners find us. Tune in next week for another episode of People of the Pod.